Hello everyone, it is I, Phantom Zwei, back with some more G-Senjou no Maou. I've just finished spending way more money than I make. It is the holidays, the middle of December, and for Shiratori also, it is a cold night in the middle of December. So, let's get back into it. Mizuha was having dinner at her parents' house, chatting with her father. Only a few dishes were laid out upon the table. The clinking of tableware echoed around the dining room. Every now and then, her father sporadically spoke up. Mizuha brightly nodded. She used a lively tone, then scooped up a spoonful of the soup in front of her. She stuck out her chin a bit and gently brought the soup to her lips. Mizuha was mimicking her elegant sister. She said, smiling wryly. Is that so? Her father muttered in response. The former director of the Gyuga Saki school had lost the old sparkle in his eyes. His company had started to decline, and had been so far into the red at one point that there was talk of throwing in the proverbial towel. Even his receding hairline seemed a testament to his weariness these days. Mizuha learned to accept that father of hers. She spun her conversation with him in a calm tone of voice, looking into his eyes kindly. She was confident that the Mizuha he beheld now was far removed from her old self, the girl who did nothing but put on show after show. Her father began. Her father's voice withered apologetically. She won't depend upon others anymore. That was what Mizuha had decided. 2 years and 10 months have passed since her sister disappeared. Mizuha graduated from high school and immediately entered the workforce. She joined a large company in the Central District, one that manufactures plastic containers of assorted sizes. The wages weren't particularly excellent, but she was certainly able to get by as long as she lived frugally. As long as she continued to forego the pleasantries of her past, comics, stuffed animals, cute dresses, and the like, she lived quite a comfortable life. Mizuha's father was naturally against her working. He'd always imagined that she would continue on to university, eventually coming to marry the heir to some successful business. But Mizuha, after losing her beloved sister a second time, refused to live a cozy life with her parents. She says her goodbye, and a frightened darkness blankets her father's eyes. He always seems to have something to say, but as usual, Mizuha's father holds his tongue. She lightly smiled, then stood from her seat. It's been a week since she last saw Kyousuke. Time has done nothing to this vast cityscape. I casually look back on the old days 3 years ago. Man, I'm getting tongue-tied early. The hamburger joint where I first arranged to meet with Mizuha still stays open until late into the night. Mizuha showed up 5 minutes after we decided to meet here. Nothing. I was just thinking back on old times. I miss the days when you used to show up 30 minutes early to every time we went out. Mizuha shrugged her shoulders jokingly. That's not what I meant. She invited me with her chin and walked ahead of me. That's something she'd never even think of doing back when I called Mizuha Shiratori. The bartender poured a particularly strong bourbon over the ice in Mizuha's glass. She downed the drink, taking a moment to roll her tongue around and take in the flavor. That question had become our ritual. Naturally, she's asking about Tokida's disappearance. Nothing. I brought it up the other day to an informant with a lot of connections in the underground, but he had nothing. What about the detective you hired? Has he still not found anything? We've been talking about this for 3 years now. What about the man who was burned to death? Heard anything from the police yet? 3 years ago, a man named Katakura died. At first, we didn't know how that was related to us. Mizuha filled me in on most of the details after being called out by the investigation team assigned to the case. They claimed that Katakura's death and Tokida's disappearance were connected. Supposedly, they didn't tell her how they were connected, but if I were to venture a guess, I wasn't sure whether to be happy or sad. With the police looking for her, the chances of Tokida being found go up drastically. Well, they were looking for her before as a missing person, but things will be different now. Homicide cases have more backing, so their efforts will spike. Mizuha gave a desperate look. Who knows? Mizuha has changed over these past 3 years. She pulls the glass to her lips again. She doesn't seem drunk at all. Mizuha begged me for comfort. I was actually relieved at this rare glimpse of weakness. Of course she is. She gently put her hand on top of the counter. Apparently that had been a prompt for me to hold it, as she eventually comes to rest her hand on top of mine. However, she timidly pulls it back the next second, as if changing her mind. Her face stiffened, apparently in response to my gaze. The same as ever. I'm saving up slowly, but Gonzo sucks a whole lot of money out from me. A crease suddenly forms on Mizuha's brow. Don't worry about me. How many times do I have to tell you? I know. I know, but I'm not pushing myself. I fell ill once in the past 3 years. That was all. I kind of miss the days when she would say, "Don't get the wrong idea," like some game character. However, the Shiratori Mizuha sitting here at this bar was a real human. One that gave off the impression of a certain artificiality. She intentionally uses self-depreciation in order to hide her true feelings, yet fails to hide them all the same. I know all too well about the bottomless sadness that she carries in her heart. It's gotten late, huh? The winter wind wildly tore at us. It flows turbulently between nearby buildings and caresses Mizuha's hair. Come to my place. The subway stopped running, right? Mizuha lives quite a ways from Central Boulevard. Not the Central Boulevard, just Central Boulevard. The official story was because the rent was cheap, but the truth is that she wanted to live far away from her parents.
お言葉に甘えようかな。
I felt like I finally saw her smile.
あれ？
Her smile suddenly disappeared. What?
姉さん。
Her voice trembles.
姉さんだ。
Her eyes were focused on a corner of the nearby building. I followed her gaze, but I couldn't see anything.
姉さん。
She suddenly broke off into a run. Hey, Mizuha!
姉さんこっち。こっちだよ。
Her voice was lost in the hustle and bustle of Central Boulevard.
ねえ見て。こっち。
She disappeared into the alley that she had been staring at earlier. What's gotten into you?
見えなかった。姉さんがいたのよ。
Only worn-out, homeless beggars populated the alley Tokita had apparently dashed into.
そんなはずは。
Mizuha's eyes, desperately searching for her sister among the darkness, suddenly became those of a young girl. You must have been mistaken. This has happened before.
だって。
Those eyes slowly lost their sheen of innocence, transforming once again into the the mature visage of a woman.
ありえないわね。
If it really had been Tokita, she would have gone straight to meet you.
そうね。だといいけど。
She seemed to mock herself with her smile.
酔っ払ってるんだわ私。もう帰りましょう。
Her shoulders droop as she walks along the sidewalk. She walks alone, as if to say that she doesn't need my help. Our metropolis was surprisingly unchanged by the years gone by. But the home we're headed to for now hasn't changed at all. 3 years have passed. As Mizuha and I crossed the threshold of my apartment, I remember those days as if they were yesterday. I love you, Shiratori. It's only been a week since Tokita's sudden disappearance. Shiratori lost sight of herself, so I invited her to my room.
今なんて。
I love you. I won't say it again.
嘘。でも私。
I know. You haven't felt right ever since Tokita disappeared.
そうよ。姉さんが。
Tears build up in her eyes.
姉さんがいなくなっちゃったよ。
Shiratori cries loudly.
私に何も言わないで。いなくなっちゃった。
She was like a lost child.
アザイ君、アザイ君。もうどうしていいのかわかんないよ。アザイ君にも嫌われちゃうよ。姉さんのアドバイスがないと何喋っていいかわかんないよ。姉さんがいないと私
I rest my hand on Shiratori's head as she cries. It's all right. I'm here. Even if you don't have Tokita, you have me. I wipe her tears away. Close your eyes. I embrace her, then steal her lips. Her sweet smell echoes in my head. She doesn't seem to be able to comprehend what just happened. With a vacant, stupid-looking expression, her gaze floats through the air. I'm going to have sex with you. Alright? She nodded. Her heart has been strained by her sister's disappearance. It's possible that she suddenly feels liberated from that pain. She seemed like a doll. Someone that simply stopped thinking. She began deliriously. To Shiratori, sex seems to be something done alongside the intent to marry. I guess this is a part of life. Hmm? I see. I'm not really sure if she's fine with me. The biggest question would be, who would be the best possible partner for Shiratori to spend her life with? We'll probably never know the answer to that. All the more reason for me to take responsibility. I put my hands on Shiratori's shoulders and take off her clothes. And I'm about to take off the screen for you guys, so be right back. And we're back. Was it good for you guys too? Ah. And now, 3 years later. Oops. I keep just cutting Shiratori off. Not meaning to, but... Or I guess I should say Mizuha now, right? I was suddenly pulled back into reality. You've started to resemble Tokita. Her roundabout way of saying things, her gestures. You really are sisters, huh? Mizuha folds her arms, then half opens her eyes as if peering through my heart. Nah, I'm fine. I said I'm fine. Hey. She pulls me by the hand and sits me down on the bed. Mizuha's her hands grip my shoulders. After a short while, a relaxing pleasure thrusts up from my shoulders and it reverberates through in my brain. It was a little too forceful, but she was certainly hitting the spot. Yeah. Her gestures and speech have changed, but Mizuha's feelings haven't. Hey, I know I ask you this all the time, but why don't you move in with me? Why? Wouldn't you prefer living closer to your work? What's with the hehe? I turned around and pushed her onto the bed. You're just a crybaby princess. Mizuha laughs, and I laugh along. You've really gotten mouthy, you know that? Yep. Where does that confidence come from? This is how we play these days. Our back and forth banter has become an everyday thing. Well, our conversations were more lively, that's for sure. You do have a way with words. I even think I'm talking to Tokita sometimes. Look, just hurry up and move in. As you can see, this room is plenty big for the two of us. Do you honestly think I'd make you... I bite my tongue, and Mizuha's teasing face draws near. I didn't say I'd pay your half. She grinned, but then suddenly, as if she was just liberated from something. She muttered and put her face to my back. Sorry about that, taking a drink. She seemed to be talking to herself, so I didn't reply. That night, we fell asleep in each other's arms. Though her attitude may have changed, her kissing was still as clumsy as ever. Teehee. Hello, Tokita. The pair of sisters were so different. It was difficult to call them a pair. However, these differences merely sparked admiration and a touch of envy in Mizuha. Unlike her, Yuki could express herself masterfully. Mizuha had always wished from the bottom of her heart to be more like her sister. Shiratori Mizuha had always seen Tokita Yuki as a strong, reliable, self-affirming entity. One that had been with her in some way as long as she could remember. If she just followed her sister, if she just did as her sister said, she wouldn't have to think about anything. That's why that day, the morning before Yuki disappeared, she'd failed to realize what was about to happen. Even now, these many years later, the events of that morning still hung heavily on her heart.
姉さん、どうしたのこんな時間に。
Mizuha had sneaked out of the house the moment Yuki had called her out. The sun was still yet to rise.
ごめんね、水葉。父親に叱られる？あ、いいんだよ。気にしないで。
In actuality, the fear had nearly burst her heart each time she twisted one of the many squeaky doorknobs between her bedroom and the front gate.
じゃあ、行こう。行くってどこに？
Mizuha didn't fail to notice the Boston bag in her sister's hand.
決まってるじゃない。ほら見て、大雪よ。
Following Yuki's following Yuki's gaze, she looked up at the pitch black sky.
雪がどうかしたの？雪だるま作りに行かない？
Yuki's innocent smile seemed particularly ecstatic.
うん、行く。どこ行く？ここはあんまり積もってないけど、東区の山の方なら行けるんじゃないかしら。じゃあ、連れてって。
Mizuha acted like a spoiled little girl for a moment as she grabbed her sister's arm. What am I going to do with you? Yuki said in a ticklish tone as she led Mizuha by the hand.
姉さんと雪だるま。懐かしいな。楽しいな。
What am I going to do with you? Her sister repeated. Her tone was more sad than excited this time around. However, Mizuha was too busy rejoicing to pay it heed. She quickly shrugged it off. They hailed a taxi, and Yuki told the driver their destination. By the time the eastern sky had begun to illuminate the fires of dawn, they neared the hilly region where they were headed for. The gravel roads shook the taxi wildly. Mizuha gazed out the milky white snowy landscape, distracted entirely from her sister sitting next to her. They got out near the deserted park, and Mizuha immediately began to gather up snow. She diligently rolled snowballs fit for a snowman's body and head. She sought out branches and stabbed them into the body to create arms. She placed a bucket from the park's bathroom on its head and decided her adorable snowman was finished.
頑張ったわね。もう姉さんは何もしてないでしょ。そうだっけ？昔からそうだったよ。まったく姉さんはぐうたらさんだな。
They both look up at the sky. The sun peeks down from between the clouds. At some point, the snow had stopped.
マフラー巻いてあげたの？うん。いけなかった？ちょっとこいつに嫉妬したわ。あ、ごめん。すぐ取り返すね。冗談よ。でも忘れないでね。
Yuki used a strangely insistent tone, but it didn't faze Mizuha.
ああ、水葉。何？姉さん。
She glanced at her sister. Yuki was staring off into the sky with a tranquil expression.
父親と話をしてあげて。
お父さん、私の？
そう。寂しいでしょ。会話のない親子なんて。
That was unexpected. Mizuha knows that Yuki is far from fond of her father. She would frequently speak ill of him, her eyes blazing with some terrifying emotion. Those eyes were now meekly staring into the blue sky, still fixed there.
一応私の実の父でもあるしね。
Mizuha decided not to think too hard on it. This was her brilliant older sister, after all. It'd be best to just obediently comply with her.
わかったよ、お姉さん。今日の昼にもね、浅井くんに同じようなこと言われたよ。
あら、そう？
悪いやつは悪いやつなりに理由を持ってるから話し合ってみるのもいいかもしれないって。
彼らしい意見ね。ならもう私は。
何？
なんでもない。帰りましょう。
もう？
そろそろ家族が起きる時間でしょ。
そっか、さすが姉さん。
Mizuha was reluctant to part with the snowman. She patted its head a few times and said goodbye. She took back the scarf, hugging it a bit before putting it away. Mizuha didn't notice anything peculiar at all. She merely thought that Yuki was wistfully gazing at their snowman. Yuki's eyes, of course, were actually fixed on her younger sister.
運転手さん、ここで止めてください。
Yuki suddenly spoke up as the taxi approached a subway station in the Eastern District.
どうしたの、姉さん？まだお家じゃないでしょ？
ちょっと用があってね。あなたは一人で帰ってちょうだい。
用事って何？私もついていったらダメ？
早く帰らないと父親に見つかるわよ。
うん、そうだけど。
It was only just now that Mizuha began to get a bad feeling about this.
姉さん、浅井くんのことでまた相談があるんだけど。
ごめんね。また今度にしてもらえない？
今度っていつ？
さあ、都合によるかしらね。彼のことならもう大丈夫だと思うわよ。
でもまだ不安で。
困った子ね。
わかった。連絡待ってるね。都合がついたら電話してね。
She struggled with the desire to add as soon as you can, but failed to do so. She was perpetually unable to speak her mind, even when speaking with her blood sister.
じゃあ、アドバイスを。
Yuki swung her legs out the taxi door, rested her feet on the curb outside, and turned back to face Mizuha. The younger sister's eyes were sparkling.
もっと人を知ろうとしなさい。そして言葉で人を動かしてみなさい。
Mizuha didn't understand her in the least. The uneasiness washing over her, drowning her, nearly brought her to tears. If she had come to understand the woman before her, if she had used the right words, would she have been able to stop her sister? Indeed, that was likely the case. However, it was too much to ask of the Mizuha sitting in that taxi. Her sister stood up, closed the car door behind her, and walked off somewhere. The snowman they had gone to the trouble of making melted away within a few days. There was no word from Yuki. Mizuha called many times, but she never heard as much as a ring. She just kept waiting for her sister. Unfortunately, she didn't even know where to wait. She stood idly on the school roof, or in front of her house's gate, rubbing the cold and anxiety from her shoulders for hours on end.
Mizuha, 何をしているんだ?
Her father confronted her about her behavior, no longer able to just sit by and watch. The night was frigid enough for her question or his question to visibly disperse into a white mist in the air. Mizuha sat curled up on the curb in front of her house.
今何時だと思ってるんだ。
The strong smell of alcohol in his breath almost drowned out the faint scent of perfume lingering about him. Director Shiratori approached Mizuha, the gin blossoms on his face, a full shade redder with frustration and anger.
またユキか。あ？ユキと遊んでいたんだろ？
違う。
She answered, looking her father in the eye.
姉さんを待ってるの。
こんな時間から遊ぶつもりだったのか。夜更かしも大概にしろ。
本当に待ってるの。
She couldn't explain well. She didn't want to say that her elder sister had disappeared. To admit that would make her all alone again. Mizuha's father glared at her, disgruntled.
いいか。ユキの母親はな、会社の金を盗んだんだ。だから親子ともども追い出した。な。
She had been told the story a few times already. Each time, Mizuha's heart became more and more hollow. She was too scared of her drunk father to say anything. I'm sorry, Ne-san. Her heart whispered an apology as fate routed the last of her feelings. Her father's verbal barrage against her sister continued endlessly. People are most easily persuaded when trying to sate their appetite. This is precisely why Mizuha often chose to meet with her father for meals.
父さん、聞いてる？
She asked her slouching father for confirmation as he sipped a cup of tea.
ああ、聞いてるよ。そうか、主任になったのか。すごいな、水葉は。
He clumsily strung words into pathetic sentences. Her father has been utterly demoralized for a few months now. The business world, the media, and everyone else have called him a loser since his company failed. Even his mistress refuses to hold relations with him. Mizuha's mother calls it all karma.
出世が早いな。さすがは父さんの。
Her father cut himself off as if brooding over something. From my daughter. Is he ashamed? Mizuha wondered. Perhaps he had been hit by the realization that he was never very fatherly to her.
次はいつ会えるんだ？
He lifts his eyes to meet Mizuha, his nose still pointed to the ground in depression. He appeared to be gauging her reaction.
そうね。あさってはどう？
私はいつでもいいよ。
Her father's face suddenly lit up. Mizuha just smiled gently, like her sister used to. I shouldn't hold a grudge. Mizuha's heart reflected on the situation as she picked a grain of rice off her father's face.
意外と可愛らしいところあるよね、お父さん。
Tears welled in her father's eyes. Mizuha felt like she had seen something awkward and looked away. I arranged to meet Mizuha on one of her days off. She's been pouring all of her energy into her work without so much as a single vacation, so I've been lucky to see her even once a week.
今度は浅井くんが遅刻ね。
Sorry, I'll buy you a drink to make up for it.
じゃ、遠慮なく。
I wouldn't quite say I insisted. We link arms and walk through the tranquil park.
ごめん、ちょっと会社から電話。
Alright?
出てもいい？
She even asked my permission. She hasn't always been so considerate. I nod, and Mizuha opens her cell. She bore a dignified expression. Mizuha's gallant answering of the telephone was almost reminiscent of Tokita.
そう、よかったわ。先方も喜んでくれるでしょうね。違う、私のラインのみんなが優秀なだけ。それだけよ。祝杯？おごってくれるって？また今度にしてもらえるかしら。今、彼とデートなの。また改めて。ありがとう。お疲れ様。
She cut the call, laughing. You're awfully dignified, huh?
そう？
You have people working under you?
今年入った新人が5人くらい。みんなよく働いてくれるわ。
You seem to be fairly well respected.
だといいけど。
She looks down with a languid expression.
何？まさか焼いてるの？
You wish.
安心して。あなたより素敵な人なんてこの世にいないわ。
I got embarrassed and looked away from Mizuha. You've really picked up a way with words. She knows exactly how to pull my strings.
直球に弱いわよね。
You're a witch, you know that?
でも嘘じゃないわ。
She whispers to me as she nuzzles into my chest. However, our embrace didn't last long. It's alright. You don't have to pretend to be strong around me. Mizuha shook her head.
さあ、買い物に行きましょうか。
She walked in front of me again. It seems Katakura was suspected of burning down Tokida's house. Mizuha and I drink sake at the usual bar.
それが本当だとしたら殺されても仕方がないわね。
Tokita should have reported it to the police.
姉さんのことだからきっと自分の手で復讐を果たしたかったんじゃない？
How stupid.
馬鹿げてるわね。
Mizuha looked down to the ground.
今にして思うわ。あの頃の姉さん、ごく稀にだけど思い詰めたような顔をしていたから。
She did?
あなたも気づかなかった？
No, I did. The last time I saw Tokita, the time she pleaded with me in this very bar, I felt the same aura. The night she entrusted Mizuha to me. Looking back now, maybe she did act strange at times.
記憶にない？
Sorry, you know me and my bad memory.
そう。
Mizuha also seemed to be brooding over something.
もっと姉さんを知ろうとするべきだった。私は姉さんを頼ってばかりだったけど、逆に姉さんには頼れる相手もいなかったの。
Mizuha then suddenly gazed at me.
私のこと好き？
Yeah. I nodded without hesitation.
ありがとう。今日は泊まらせて。
We finish our drinks and leave the bar. It's not often you ask to stay over.
迷惑だったら帰るけど。
Not at all. You can stay over every day. She sighed.
浅井くんは少し変わったわよね。
Is that so?
落ち着いたわよ。昔はもっとギラギラしてたもの。
I guess you defanged me. I meant it as one of my usual jokes, but...
そうだよね。ごめん。
Are you alright? You're acting different from usual.
だって浅井くんは。
Call me Kyousuke. I speak decisively, and Misa's eyes shoot open.
ダメ。また甘えてしまう。
You know my limit now, though, right? She bit her lip.
ダメよ。ほら、思い出してよ。私が迷惑ばっかりかけてるから、あなたは肺炎になったんじゃない？
That's not what happened.
嘘よ。あの頃の私はひどかったわ。気分の浮き沈みが激しくて、甘えたかと思ったら怒り出して。
I think back on that day. Back before the young girl I first dated began to wear suits. It was a night so cold I felt my lungs might freeze over.
映画楽しかったね、京介くん。
It was a year after Mizuha and I first made love.
京介くんのお家はいい匂いがするな。
Laughing in full sweet little girl mode, she hugged me randomly, as if it were a natural thing to do.
どうしたの？何汗かいてるのかな？ひょっとして水葉のこと好きで緊張してるの？
She smiled mischievously as she teased me.
ねえチューしてチューしてよチュー今二人きりだからいいでしょ京介くん
I'm getting cavities over here, guys. I need some help. Oh, it hurts.
チューが足りないよギュってしてよ
Not right now.
なんで
Sorry.
ひどいよどうして京介くん言ったよね人前ではやめろって誰もいないよいいじゃない
No, I just...
何それ何それ何それいつもそうじゃない思ってることあるなら言ってよ私は全部話してるよ素直になってるよ何か悪いの悪いなら言ってよ
Mizuha shoved my chest. And as soon as she did so, my legs gave way, and I lost consciousness.
だから浅井君は3日も入院することになったの。
You didn't send me anywhere. I just caught a cold.
お医者さんが言ってた。体力が落ちてたのはストレスが原因だって。
Well, what do you expect? Gonzo was practically beating me over the head every day. Mizuha sighed.
ごめんなさい。いろいろと。
It's fine. Come here. I pull her over, and Mizuha rests in my arms with a confused expression.
私ね、
She began with a sigh.
好きな人にはどんな感情をぶつけても許されるって思ってた。
Mizuha didn't have a single person to talk to until Tokita returned to her.
舞い上がってたよ。浅井君が優しいから何をしても嫌われないって思ってた。まるで物の扱いと同じじゃない？あなたが対等な人間であることを忘れていたんだよ。
There was a time when I tried to treat her like an object too. I'm so glad I changed my mind that day 3 years ago.
よく今まで我慢できたわよ。
Put up with you?
私と一緒にいてくれたじゃない。
Don't be silly. I'm with you because I want to be with you. Tears welled up in Mizuha's eyes.
同情してくれたんでしょ。
What?
私と付き合ってくれたのは、私を抱いてくれたのは不憫に思ったからなんでしょ。
I was a bit lost for words, not knowing how to answer.
姉さんが最近私のことを頼んだからでしょ。
So she knew that much.
バーのマスターに聞いたの。姉さんがいなくなる前日にあなたは姉さんに頭を下げられてたはずよ。
Mizuha's dignified voice deteriorated into sobs. Before she truly began to cry, I decided on my answer. You don't date someone for over 3 years out of nothing but pity. I wasn't going to lie.
分かってる。
I tried to keep her tears at bay, but despite my efforts, they were soon running down her cheeks.
分かっているからこそ嬉しくて申し訳なくて。
It's alright, sweetheart. Just calm down.
私怖かったのよ。一人じゃ何もできないから誰かを頼りたかった。それがたまたま浅井君だった。
And I'm so happy you chose me. So come on, there's no need to cry.
あなたが高熱を出してたなんて知らなかった。知ろうともしなかった。そんなんだから姉さんの悩みも聞いてあげられなかった。
She just kept repeating, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I run my fingers through her hair, gently petting her. You've asked me about a lot of things since those days, and to the best of my knowledge, I've told you everything. You even made me comfortable enough to talk about when I lived in that rundown shack in Hokkaido. Mizuha gave a small nod. Having someone to confide in is important to me, too. To me, too, rather. You're the only person in the world that I could be completely honest with. Mizuha started to quiver a bit.
ありがとう。
This time, she repeats thank you about 5 times. After that, we needed no more words. I gently wipe her tears away. We embrace each other, then head to the bed. I gently push Mizuha down onto it. And I'm gonna push you guys out of this scene in all likelihood, so see ya soon. Do you mind? Mizuha shook her head.
私もして欲しかったから
Then call me Kyousuke. I use a commanding tone, which Mizuha seems to find somewhat strange.
どうしたのよ呼び方なんてどうでもいいんじゃないの
I was just thinking, words really are important.
そうね姉さんならそういうわ
Then, Mizuha closes her eyes.
京介くん
Aww. See you guys soon. Alright, we're 2 for 2 in this video. Welcome back, guys. Before I fall asleep, I make a decision. There's something I need to talk to Mizuha about. The tables have turned, haven't they? And I do think we're probably nearing the end of her chapter. I don't remember well, but it really feels like that. The past 2 days seem to have taken their toll on Mizuha's father. With flaccid jowls, an ever-shrinking frame, and an utter lack of confidence, he slowly but surely shovels food into his mouth. He eventually looks up, suddenly filled with resignation.
いざもういいんだ
The brandy bottle next to him was just out of his reach. In its place was an open packet of what looked to be stomach medicine.
もういいって
私のことだよ
He clarified in a hoarse voice.
どういう意味かしら
私が悪かった
He massaged his temples a bit as he narrowed his eyes in pain.
私が悪かったんだよ水葉
Before her was the ruins of the evil man he once was. The man who drove his mistress and daughter out of his home. The man who embezzled funds from a school's construction project. Was now laying defeated. In the end, he was found out, and was forced to live a life in perpetual harsh disfavor. Even Hashimoto, the boy who'd taken Mizuha captive in the school, still seemed to hold her father's actions against him. The broken man's eyes light up, his face stiffens, and he groans.
私も私生児だったんだ
そう
聞いてもらえるかな
もちろん
With a face that seemed about to burst into tears at any moment, he laid bare the pain of his youth. He told her that his foster parents had been worthless, terrible people. He said his biological father had run away with another woman when he was just a baby. The mother he was left with, the last person he could rely on, then abandoned him as well. They had been eating at a ramen stall in Osaka, and the next thing he knew, she disappeared. Forever. He suggested that the incident might have been the reason he avoided eating with his family. At the conclusion of his story, he heaved a heavy sigh and stared at his daughter. Mizuha knew he failed to find any sympathy in her eyes. She just kept silent. Silence can sometimes be more effective than words. It packs a powerful punch, especially when used against someone's weakest points. The silence Mizuha planted was at last broken by the words she had waited to hear for so long.
Yukiに謝りたい
The fingertips on his temples now dug their nails sharply into his head, and his whole body trembled.
謝りたい謝らせてくれ
he groaned. He took on a position that seemed more akin to prayer than anything else.
でも姉さんはもういないわ。
He buried his face in his hands, then stopped moving.
それでも私はいるから。
Her father's lingering trembles instantly ceased. The moment Mizuha had been aiming for had arrived. She mustn't miss the chance to say everything she wanted him to hear.
私にお父さんを責めることはできないよ。なぜなら私だって姉さんを苦しめていたのだから。わかるでしょ。家を出て行った姉さんが爪に火を灯すような毎日を過ごしていたのに、私はぬくぬくと可愛いぬいぐるみを集めていたの。姉さんの深い悩みを知ろうともせずに自分ばかり助けてもらっていたのよ。あなたはとても目立った悪人だけど、私に言わせればか弱い少女に甘んじていた私の方がよっぽどタッチが悪いわ。あなたに罪があるのなら私だって糾弾されるべきなのよ。昔まだ心を閉ざしていた彼の部屋にお邪魔したことがある。彼が踏みとどまらなければ私は侵されていたと思う。それぐらい足りない女の子だった。彼と姉さんの深い優しさに包まれていなければ生きていけ。大した取り柄もない私はただ守られていたの。
Mizuha took a deep breath after her long speech. She herself couldn't believe how fluently she spoke. Mizuha considered it a gift from her sister. I'd like to borrow some of that because fluent speech, not my forte.
すまない。
Tokita Yuki was reflected in her father's eyes. The night her father broke down in tears, Kyousuke called Mizuha and arranged to meet with her.
一体何なの？デートするには少し遅い時間じゃない？
I was hoping we could do a little stargazing. I thought it said strategizing. Kyousuke shrugged his shoulders. If that had been a joke, she didn't understand it. The sky was blanketed by dark gray clouds and dry snow.
本当のことを言いなさいよ。
Well, there's a restaurant around here that's still open, you see. It suddenly dawned on her. It wasn't rare for him to wear a suit, but this was the first time she'd seen him wear a bow tie. She'd also never seen him carry a bag like the one he now held in his left hand. Hesitantly, but in a light-hearted, joking tone, she said,
プロポーズならまだ早すぎるわよ。
You figured me out, he said, laughing calmly.
京介くんはボケがいまいちらしいじゃない？
Her pulse sped up, and her lips went stiff. Kyousuke's grin only grew wider. See, now that's the kind of thing that makes me want the old you back.
どういう意味？
You just completely ruined the mood. You used to keep quiet even when you knew what I was about to do.
そんな嘘でしょ？
She laughed timidly, but his face sharpened in sincerity. Not in the least. It's what I want to do as long as I get to do it with you. He spoke in a low monotone. It was the voice he used when dealing with the Yazai Corporation business. In other words, Kyousuke was nervous. Mizuha, cornered, could do nothing but spout words of rejection.
私でよければなんて言うと思った？
Wait! Screamed the alarm ringing in her mind.
よく考えてよ。まだ早すぎる。
For some reason, she grew cross.
仕事があるのよ。この年で結婚なんかしたら周りに迷惑をかけてしまうわ。
Her mouth refused to stop there.
それにごめんなさい。私はあなたにふさわしいかどうか自信が持てないの。
At some point, Mizuha's face had reverted to the one she wore back in her school days.
あなたにはたくさん迷惑をかけた。
She didn't know how to react to her beloved Kyousuke, so she tried to get his attention by acting cold.
いやそりゃ 初めての時は結婚してなんて言ったけれど、責任を感じる必要はないのよ。
Kyousuke just quietly stared at Mizuha as she panicked. The snow falling on Kyousuke's long bangs filled her chest with sorrow.
ごめん。今日は帰る。
She turns her back to Kyousuke, as if to run away. He calls out to her. His gentle arms reach out to her. When those arms embrace her, she can't help but want to bare her feelings to him, to depend on him thoroughly. Thus, she closes her eyes, plugs her ears, and dashes away. She doesn't remember where she ran off to after that. All she remembers is jumping onto a subway train and heading home. Not to her one-bedroom apartment in the Western District, but to her parents' home, where her father is. I heard him. Her heavy footsteps wander through the town as a winter silence envelops it. Her cell phone has been ringing incessantly ever since she bolted away from Kyousuke. She hasn't been able to muster the courage to answer it yet. Huh? Her house had come into view before she realized she was nearing it. The gate was covered with snow. Perhaps what she saw was only a hallucination. Perhaps the figure was real. In any case, it was staring at Mizuha's family home. It was gazing straight at the window of what was once Mizuha's room. She subconsciously straightened herself up.
姉さん。
Tokita Yuki was standing there on the street. She was wearing the same red coat and black pantsuit that she wore the last time Mizuha saw her.
水葉、こんな時間まで何してたの？とっくに門限は過ぎてるわよ。
Her long black, almost transparently thin hair was fluttering in the wind.
帰ってきたんだね。
Her sister shook her head, neither in denial nor confirmation. Confused, Mizuha looked for what to say next. What to say?
あのね、浅井君と付き合ってもらってるんだ。
おめでとう。お似合いよ、水葉。
姉さんのアドバイスが効いたんだよ。ありがとう、姉さん。
Yuki nodded, and as if strengthening her resolve, said,
私が今まで何をしていたのか知りたくない？
うん、聞かせて。私、今度こそちゃんと聞くよ。姉さんのこと、たくさん知りたいんだ。
Mizuha drew in close enough to touch her sister. The illusion had legs. It wasn't a ghost. Her sister really had come back.
海を見に行ってたの？
海？
長い長い旅だったわ。外国の海は広く澄み渡っていて、波が宝石のように輝いてた。私はお母さんの形見を持ってお母さんと一緒に波打ち際を歩いていたの。
Just 1 second, I'm adjusting the volume of the game here a little bit. I think it's a little low. Because I was just thinking, the music in this game is just so great. If you can hear the subtle tune in the background here, pay attention to it. It's really good.
お母さん。
Oh my gosh, I completely lost track of time. We'll try to get through this scene before I cut the video, though. Mizuha muttered as her chest filled with loneliness.
そのために3年近くも行方をくらましていたの。
Her sister answered bluntly.
そうよ。何の連絡もしないでごめんね。
I see, Mizuha says, hanging her head down. She's lying. Mizuha's not a little girl anymore. She may not have known of her sister's past, but that answer was obviously not right. Her sister's skin was too white to have been strolling along the beaches for years. Above all, Tokita Yuki wasn't cold-hearted enough to go on a trip to mourn her mother without so much as contacting Mizuha. Perhaps she really was traveling abroad. She may even have visited the sea. Nevertheless, Mizuha knew. Her sister had killed someone and spent the past 3 years running away from the police. If she had contacted Mizuha, she knew her foolish little sister would have told the police of her whereabouts. She must have decided to come back because the investigation has progressed to a point where she's cornered, with no escape. Tokita Yuki had come back to hand herself in. After looking more closely, Mizuha noticed that Yuki was thinner than the last time she saw her. Her hair looks dried out. The vast strength hiding behind her gentle smile had all but dissipated. She was shocked. Her sister had indeed killed someone. Her sister, who talked so much about the power behind words, gave in to violence and set fire to a car. She left Mizuha behind and lived a life on the run in order to protect herself. However, Mizuha just smiled.
海かよかったね。お母さんもきっと喜んでるよ。
She wanted to stay the little girl her sister loved so dearly.
あのね。
Yuki's eyes gorged in an unfamiliar color, but the shine in her eyes that seemed capable of seeing through everything was still there. She opened and closed her mouth repeatedly, as if trying to say something and then changing her mind. Then suddenly, she let it all out.
ごめん。一人ぼっちにさせてしまって。
Mizuha was happy enough to just hear those words. People would soon scorn Yuki as a cowardly murderer. They wouldn't care to understand her reasons. But no matter what society did to her sister, Mizuha swore never to blame Yuki. The crybaby in Mizuha surfaced for a moment. She sobbed and bit into her suit sleeve. Before the tears could cloud her vision of her sister's face, she couldn't help but whine a little.
私ね、働いてるんだよ。もう主任になって一つのチームを任されてるの。同期じゃ一番の出世頭だよ。すごいでしょ。
Yuki looked at Mizuha's attire.
すごいわね。見違えたわ。あとね、京介くんも私のこと好きだって。ついさっきなんか結婚まで申し込まれたの。私まだそんな気はないのに。ねえ、これって彼の方が私を好きってことじゃない？へえ、やるわね。あの彼を虜にするなんて。
Way to go, Mizuha.
もう続婚みたい。だから一人ぼっちじゃないんだ。謝らなくていいんだよ。今幸せなのも全部姉さんのおかげだから。
Mizuha didn't want to burden her sister. She wore a pained expression on her face, but her eyes were filled with a soft gentleness.
それからなんと父さんにね、ついに謝らせたよ。謝らせた？あの男にユキに謝らせてくれって。おいおい泣き出したの。どうやって？姉さんに言われた通りに話し合って言葉でやっつけてやったんだ。
For a moment, Yuki looked overcome. She quickly held back her overflowing emotions and shut her mouth.
私はあなたの思ってるような。
Mizuha shook her head strongly as she wailed. The part of her brain that was still calm warned her that her sister was going to leave again. The joy from her reunion with her sister rebounded into deep sadness.
姉さんにはかなわないよ。私ね、姉さんになろうとして仕草とか言葉遣いを真似してたんだ。だって私甘えん坊だから自分で自分の性格も作れなかったの。私はあなたを守るという責任を。責任なんてないよ。だって私たちは姉妹じゃない。お互いが支え合うべきだったんだよ。でもごめんなさい。いいのよ、水。あなたは悪くないのよ。なぜなら。
A teardrop poured down Yuki's slim chin. Mizuha interrupted her sister's words, something she never would have even thought of doing before.
ごめんね、姉さ かった。姉さんだって辛かったんだって。誰にも打ち明けられないほどの悩みがあって苦しんで、それでいなくなったんでしょ。それもあなたを置き去りにする理由にはならないわ。私はただ逃げたの。その上もうどうにもならないと思ったから京介君に水葉を押し付けたのよ。でもそのおかげで彼もその気になってくれたみたい。
Tears washed over Mizuha's smile. Yuki had begged Kyousuke to the very end for Mizuha's sake. Her sister asked. I will, she thought. Mizuha couldn't imagine anyone forgiving her weakness, other than that kind, strong man. Just as she opened her mouth to answer, her sister said,
答えなくても顔に書いてあるわね。叶わないな、姉さんには。彼をよろしく。
Her sister was about to leave again. Mizuha forced a smile.
ありがとう、姉さん。ありがとう。
Will she ever return? Mizuha had no idea.
ごめんね、水ちゃん。私からも。
The snow piles up. Her sister's silhouette blurs into the distance. Mizuha's heart comes to a decision. If her sister ever returns, she'll drag her out under the winter sky to make another snowman. Okay, I think this is just going to be a really long episode, because I think this is probably the last scene. So we're going to push on, despite it already being almost an hour and 10 minutes. Just really enjoying this route. It's good. Spring, the next year. Mizuha doesn't talk about her sister all the time like she used to. But she surely hasn't forgotten her. Tokita Yuki's name name caused quite a sensation last winter. However, Mizuha refused to falter. Despite being constantly slandered with talk of her rotten father and sister, she visited Tokita in prison. She came to a firm decision after one such encounter. She decided to be happy for her sister's sake as well. That suits you.
そう？
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen you wear something so frilly.
たまにはいいじゃない。
Well, normally you're only supposed to wear this once in your lifetime.
二度と着ることにならないようお互い努力しましょう。
Yeah. Together. Mizuha isn't alone anymore. She's not the little girl sitting in the corner of the classroom anymore.
そろそろ開幕ね。
Her hand in mine stiffened a little.
ねえ、京介くん。
What?
雪だるまは好き？
Not really.
好きって言ってよ。
Okay. I like them.
なら今度作るときはあなたも混ぜてあげる。
Oh, great. You're planning to make me do all the work, aren't you?
あら、どうしてバレたの？
Looks like I still haven't disciplined you enough yet.
やれるものならやってみてよ。
Alright. Close your eyes.
ちょっと、もう幕が開くわよ。
You really are weak against these things.
やめてったら大勢の人に見られるわよ。
Yeah, the Yakuza bunch will be howling. I forcefully near Mizuha's lips.
わかったわ。私のこと好き？
Yeah,
なら結婚してくれる？
that's a good one.
最後にこれだけは言わせて。
I couldn't wait any longer. Clapping and cheers welled up from the other side of the curtain.
あのね。
I shut up her loud mouth. It may sound rude, But I don't need to hear those words to know what she was trying to say. A melting sensation floods my heart through my lips as I imagine our future together. Naturally, Tokida's there too. Her shoulders tremble slightly. Ever the adorable young girl.
だからこれだけは言わせてって。
Yeah. Mizuha only wanted to say one thing. Thank you. Alright guys, that was Mizuha's chapter. So with her route done, we now only have the main route to go onto Usami's path, and that will actually be the end of this one. It's been a long journey, but we still got a whole nother fourth of the game to go. That said, I really hope that you enjoyed this one. Let me know if you did. And hope to see you all next time.